Okay, so this is the 3D aquarium background that I'm doing. I started by doing step-by-step photos and then decided I'm going to also do a video. So I'm just going to review what I did on this first part before I coat it with cement and set it in the tank and all that. But basically it's just real simple. I went and I found my styrofoam, but you can buy it from like Home Depot or Lowe's. Just get foam insulation board for your backing. But as you can see on mine, I just took smaller flat pieces, pieced them together, silicone the joints, and then on the front did several different layers. For these big chunks on the bottom, what I used were I had found some 4 and 6 inch blocks of styrofoam, and I just tore chunks off of it and then shaped them just using my hand. You don't even need any tools. So just example real quick, just by rubbing it like that, you can shape it and almost like sanding it, and you can get your different pieces. Just make sure the part you put down is the flat edge. You always want to do your flat edge down to your board, because if you have any kind of gaps, there'll be potential for it to break off in the tank, and if you try to fill it up with silicone, it's just going to take 3 times longer to dry. So you don't want any gaps. Anywhere you have a gap, don't even bother filling with silicone. And then for these mid-levels, again, if you're unable to find some blocks, you can just take the thin 1-inch pieces and just stack them up and create you, put you some different layers, and then just kind of carve into it with your fingers. Get you some, I did in between my layers, I went ahead to make crevices and stuff, just dug that out. You don't really have to try to avoid having any kind of pattern, because having a pattern is what makes it look unnatural. So try and keep it semi-random. It's kind of hard. You'll actually think you're being random with it and end up having a pattern like I sort of did here. But just kind of keep an eye on it, stand it up every once in a while as you're doing it, and keep making adjustments. The big thing too is, and all this will be in the step-by-step photos, but make sure you measure out your tank and lay down some masking. I laid down some masking tape on my table. That way I could lay the pieces into it to be sure they would fit. And right here I laid out my center support beam. You don't want to forget about that, because if you make one solid piece, you'll never get it in your tank. So you got to make sure it'll clear that. I'm trying to think of anything else. Oh, another big thing that through looking at several others people it did, one thing people forget is on your details, like right here, stuff like this, you want to make it 3 to 4 times larger than what you want, because when you do your 3 to 4 small coats of cement, it's going to fill those up. So if you don't make them large enough, you're just going to wind up with flat, plain looking cement. So make sure you make them deep enough and larger. Exaggerate everything you do, and you'll be good then. Before you silicone it also, it's good to, I just use masking tape and just put a couple small pieces behind all my pieces and set them on my board. And then I set my board up probably for a good couple hours and just kind of looked at it, kept looking it over to make sure I liked everything. There were a few things as it was standing there I decided I didn't like, and I went ahead and changed. So definitely make sure you take a look at it for a little bit, and don't just silicone it up right away, because you might end up hating something you did. Also, I didn't do this, but you can. Most people carve inlets in and make spaces to hide their filtration tubing and intakes and heaters and stuff. Personally, I just skip that because I honestly don't have my filtration set up in a permanent spot, and I'm probably going to end up moving it around, so I didn't want to build it into the background and then end up having to move it later. But if yours is pretty much set where you want it, I would go ahead and hide it. But and that, again, just make sure you mark out where it is and dig it out. It's real simple stuff. I mean, once you get going on it, like all this I did in maybe an hour or two. So this is actually the okay, so I got my fast setting cement patcher here. They didn't have the brand I wanted that I've seen other people use, but it's all pretty much the same thing. Just make sure whatever you get don't have a lot of stones in it and stuff like that, unless that's what you want. But if you want it to just be kind of a smooth texture, or fit the texture of whatever you've carved out, make sure it's fine powder. You want to do kind of like a watery pancake batter consistency. You don't want it too thick. You want it thin enough to run into everything, but too thin and watery, and it could crack or not adhere right. So just kind of practice with it. Remember, you're going to be doing a couple different coats, so there's room for error, and anything you know, if you make a mistake, it can be fixed pretty easy, so I wouldn't stress out too much about it. The stuff I got sets pretty quick, so I'm gonna go ahead and mix it up off video, and then I'll go ahead and start brushing a little bit on, and then go ahead and kick it off video again. So I'm going to go ahead and mix it up. Oh, another big thing, make sure, try and get as much loose styrofoam off as you can. I mean, you don't have to get it all, but if there's like a big chunk, get it off, because that might end up causing problems later. Alright, so I'm going to mix it up, and then back on for a couple brush strokes. Alright, so this stuff isn't exactly mixing up as well as I'd hoped. I don't know, maybe I added too much water, but I'm just going to go ahead and brush it on and see how it turns out. And on the next coat, if it's too much water, I can do a little different. But here we go. Try and get a little bit of this thicker stuff. Just gonna, oh, sorry, off the screen. Brush this in here. Alright, so you get the basic idea. I'm going to go ahead and do this because this stuff sets quick. So, be back after first coat. Okay, so it's starting to get dark, but I got the first coat on both of these. I started out with a pretty watery mix like I'd seen other people use, and honestly it wasn't going on remotely close to how I wanted. It was spreading real, I'd run the brush over it and I could see the styrofoam kind of shine through, and it was kind of pooling up in spots and not covering, so I went ahead and just mixed it up thicker. It's kind of like a pasty mud consistency, and just enough to where it would stick over. When I ran the brush over, I wouldn't see any styrofoam come poking through. Just make sure when you do it, don't let it get too thin like it did when I started, but also don't go too thick, because if you get it on too thick at once, when it all dries and gets hard, it's actually putting a lot of weight on this, and I would be afraid it would break apart. So also make sure when you're putting it on, you have it pretty well supported. I almost broke a piece off because I had it hanging over the edge of my little makeshift table here, and the weight started to bend on that joint, and the silicone almost come apart. So luckily I caught it in time. Just be mindful of what you're doing. Another tip when I was putting it on, turn it so that the top edge is facing you. So for example, this up here is the top of this piece. I turned it towards me this way and brushed on so that I covered all the tops, because there are going to be some spots that are hard to get to or hard to cover up, and if you have the top towards you, you can get all that, and if you miss anything, it's going to be kind of like on a bottom edge, like say this, where no one's really going to see it. So definitely work from all the angles that are going to be visible, cover those first, and then go through secondary, kind of cover everything else up. This stuff sets pretty quick, so you got to move a little fast, but all in all, I'm pretty happy with the first coat. Now with the second one, I'm going to make sure to pick up some color. I wanted to go with a sandstone, or kind of like a red, kind of like lava rock, but where I went, they didn't really have a lot of choice, so I think I'm probably just going to end up going with kind of a bluish gray, or kind of just darker colors, and that'll match the kind of rock I have in my tank anyway. So if it turns out I don't like it, I can always recolor it later. But anyway, this is everything for now. I'll go ahead and get some more video tomorrow when I do the second coat, and then let it cure for, I'll be letting it cure for a week, and once it cures for a week, I'll go ahead and drain the tank and silicone it in. So hopefully it won't be long, and I can put it up for y'all to see. Thanks.